One of the great things about ET Awards is that people who really matter get together to talk about things that really matter. And so, ladies and gentlemen, here's our panel of top-notch CEOs. First up, Sajjan Jindal, Chairman, JSW Group. S.N. Subramanian, CEO and MD, Larsen & Toubro. Bhavish Agarwal, co-founder and CEO, Ola. Amit Agarwal, country head, Amazon India. Vibha Padalkar, MD and CEO, HDFC Life. Now, this blue chip panel will discuss the absolute top of the mind issue, life after COVID, the challenge of jobs and growth. Arijit Burman, Deputy Resident Editor, The Economic Times, will be moderating this wonderful and insightful discussion. Here goes.
Thank you, Cyrus, and good evening, everyone. A novel coronavirus, possibly transmitted by animals sold at a market in the Chinese city of Wuhan, spread to create one of the worst global crises since the Second World War in 2020. Since then, we have braced the new normal in businesses and in our everyday lives as politicians and central banks across the world pulled out their fiscal bazookas to defend economies. This new crisis has also given way to newer, bolder opportunities and policy shifts to tackle growth, employment, and survival. To talk about how businesses have tweaked and maneuvered these troubled times, we have a very diverse panel. So let's dive straight in. SNS, if I want to come straight to you, by and large, from the beginning of this year, 2021, there is a lot of vaccine optimism that is sweeping the world. Vaccines clearly are the new instruments of soft power. Even China wants to leverage that. They're building capacities in Africa and other emerging markets. What role can we in India play both in terms of manufacturing as well as R&D in the field of synthetic biology?
Tough question to answer for me, Arjit. I can build the vaccine factories, but having said that, I think the paradigm of the world, as much as we knew, has totally shifted. Mm-hmm. And to a large extent, though we thought the pandemic was over, again there is resurgence of it here and there. And everywhere in the world, nobody wants you to come and meet. Everybody says, come over Team, come over Zoom, something like that. There's some uncertainty going on. So I think some confidence booster is required. And I think that is where the Atmanirbhar idea that the Prime Minister floated, I think has really taken off, especially in this area of vaccine. Mm-hmm. It's really remarkable that two Indian companies, one at Pune and one at Hyderabad, did come out with the vaccine. Many of us have had the luck to have it, and many others, nearly 24 million Indians have had it so far. And that the country is also using it to leverage its diplomatic soft power, if you would like to call that, to move it across is a phenomenal thing. What we need to understand in the immediate vicinity of our country, especially in Middle East, certain parts of Africa, even certain parts of CS, etc., there's a fair amount of Indian diaspora. Mm-hmm. Many of them have also been prevented from traveling out, moving around in these countries because of the spread of corona. Right. And they have been under severely harsh conditions therein, because much of these Indians who are there are not the high type Indians. Many of them are working class and laborers, etc., who had gone there to earn the extra bread. And they have really suffered quite a bit due to the restrictions imposed by these countries. Some of them took advantage of the flight back home and came, but many of them are still there for various reasons. Right. I think by using, by inventing the vaccine, by first of all testing it on our own citizens in many ways, including after the vaccines having gone through the rigorous process, and second, using it as a method to say that we are also willing to export it to other countries in spite of a huge population, much of it is yet to be vaccinated. I think it's a phenomenal way of going about how India looks to not only ourselves, but also look to the immediate neighborhood and to the world at large. That we also send it across to continents like South America and others, Brazil and few other countries, is also a remarkable show how we are willing to stretch ourselves beyond what is required.
Bhavish, someone who offers, as a company, mobility solutions, what role, say, can private sector play in this massive rollout of vaccines?
I actually believe the way India has handled this pandemic under the leadership of the Prime Minister, it shows India's ethos to the world, the ethos of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, of the whole world is a family, and of our inclusive, empathetic approach to life in general, the discipline our society has, and also our outlook to people, beyond our shores, right? And the other thing that I believe the way the Prime Minister and the government has really inflected towards a much more stronger push for the industry, with the slogan of Atmanirbhar Bharat. I believe the slogan of Atmanirbhar Bharat is one of an outward-looking India, an India which can actually become a much stronger part of global supply chains and leverage Indian strengths in technology, R&D, manufacturing, and really use this geopolitical situation also in a way to gain an advantage, this disproportionate advantage on the global stage. Now, given that macro picture, I believe the future for new technologies is very bright in India, and companies like ourselves, like many others in the digital space, in the new technology, new energy space, this is going to be a massive positive if we leverage that opportunity. That's one major theme that I feel Indian industry will really step up to. The second is, given the situation on the vaccination drive, like you mentioned in India, recently the government has also opened up private hospitals, nursing homes to provide the vaccination drive much more impetus and much more parallelization. And I believe in due course that will only strengthen with more and more companies getting access to possibly distributing these vaccines to their employees, or their a platform like us would love to distribute these kind of vaccines to our drivers. We have more than 1 million drivers across the country. So we definitely are engaging with the government to see how we can lend our weight into this and help accelerate the whole vaccination drive.
Mr. Jindal and Mr. Subramaniam, one thing, we started by talking about vaccine optimism sweeping the whole world, but one offshoot of that is the recent inflationary trends and increases in input prices. Just when we were tiptoeing our way out of slowdown or recession, we are faced with these challenges. How are your companies handling this, and what do you think is happening? How are others also dealing with this issue?
So Arijit, I think the way the world has tried to tackle this pandemic and try to come out of this recessionary situation, every country in the world printed a lot of money, and a huge amount of liquidity has been pumped into the system. And every country is working on to build infrastructure, spend that money on building infrastructure and various other activities, which is inflationary in nature by sheer the amount of money that has been put into the system. Correct. So this is very clearly was known that this kind of extra money that is pumped into the system will be inflationary. On top of that, we are seeing the oil prices touching $70, which is not helping either the inflation. So this is a problem, and also there is a commodity super cycle, as we call it within our organization, that it's a commodity super cycle. All commodities, the prices have really.
You will be very happy.
For a short term, one would make more money, but it's I don't know if it's good for the world, but for the moment, prices have gone up a lot. Input prices have gone up, as well as the selling prices have gone up. So cost of projects have gone up, and SNS, of course, would like to talk about that. But that has kind of affected. But I think we have to take it in our stride that this inflation will be there, and I hope the government does not come heavy on controlling the inflation by restricting the growth in the economy. Because as of today, as we speak, what is very important is to grow the economy and to give more jobs to the people and take the economy into a different cycle and different level. That is what is important. And we, as government has rightly done, they have accepted that they will play around with a higher fiscal deficit just for that purpose, so that for 1 year we need to come out of this crisis that we had.
Correct. Mr. Subramanian, is India worried that suddenly we are facing these headwinds?
As Sajjan correctly said, this is expected, right? World over, we have seen huge currency being printed. One advantage we had was the lower oil prices. Unfortunately, due to OPEC getting together and curtailing oil production, oil prices have also gone, and people are not using the strategic reserves. And on top of it, we saw Qatar joining back the Middle East regime, and thereby further uh, further cartelization is taking place from that point of view.
Correct.
We're getting hit from all sides. Excess notes in circulation, Middle East oil prices going up. So I think we got to learn to live with it for some time to come. The best way to look at it is that ultimately we got to see what is good for the country. From my point of view, the biggest crisis facing them today is creation of jobs. And as Keynes once said, dig your way out of the trouble. So, as Sajjan correctly said, we just got to dig a hole everywhere and hope to cover it with concrete and steel to see that we get out of the trouble. And for digging the road and covering it up with some concrete, we got to spend some money. I guess we got to do it. I only hope that it doesn't get out of control from that point of view. But I guess there are very good managers from the economic and other point of view handling that part of it, and thereby we get over it. And the only way today to create jobs is by getting onto projects, by getting onto various forms of creation of job opportunities, and just employ people, because millions and millions have gone back home,
Correct.
back to the villages, etc. And there's a lot of unemployment, both in the rural as well as in the urban areas. People have lost jobs. We got to get them back into some kind of activity, and that's only job and some fair wage for that. And the only way to do it is forget about everything but create jobs. And that means some inflation. I guess we got to live with it.
And that gives me the cue to ask the next question to Vibha. That, another very important issue is the fact that social security is no longer a marginal issue. It's very much mainstream, and the pandemic has actually compounded that. How do we design, a safety net that is A, both fiscally prudent, and B, relevant socially as well? I mean, it's a tough balancing act. How do we do that? And as an add-on, I would say, how do we make India a far more pension society? Because our savings are also coming down. So unless until you are a government servant, chances are that you will remain vulnerable.
Absolutely, Arijit. And it has to be done in a calibrated basis, and but at the same time, some level of injection, if you like, or encouragement, call it what you may. People don't wake up and say that, I need to protect my family, or we live in a sense of optimism, which is good, but doesn't really make ends meet. And today, if you were to look at even the unemployment numbers right at the beginning of the pandemic, we did go through some level of shock. Yes, we hopefully are light at the end of the tunnel and so on. But, large portion of our workforce is in the sector that does not have assured pension. And also pension assets as a percentage of GDP is less than 5%. So woefully inadequate. Of course, this I'm talking about non-governmental regular people, either salaried or self-employed. Similarly, you need insurance to drive a car, but you don't need insurance to live your life. And so on. So, and being a breadwinner and so on. Lots of things are being done by the government. Absolutely brilliant in terms of JAM Trinity, the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and then mobility solutions and compulsory bank account, so that direct benefit transfers go and there's very little leakage. But I think next step is something that we can look at as a country. We can look at how, there are structural changes in even small aspects, such as how pension is looked at. How does one make it compulsory for people to put money aside? And also some initiatives, for example, can we look at every Indian the way we have Aadhaar, one retirement number, and there is enough portability, whether from EPFO to NPS and so on. Some little bit of sweetener. Today we do have ATCCD, but can we look at it being more broad-based to encourage people to look after themselves?
If we are saving less, we are certainly spending more. And Amit you have a unique opportunity, and perspective of to gauge these changing consumer behaviors in both in US as well as in India. How has the customer or a consumer evolved in the last 1 year, in the last 12 months of pandemic and lockdowns around the world?
Yeah, I think firstly, I would say COVID has surely highlighted the importance of just digital and online in lives and livelihoods of people. And I think a way to answer your question is to look at consumers and businesses together. It's more of a network effect, and I'll tell you why. So very obviously, customers have structurally moved towards shopping online, both in terms of coverage. Pretty much 100% of PIN codes in India shop now online for surely, because we know on Amazon they do, and in terms of the diversity of stuff that they buy, last year has had people move more into essentials than they were before. So that has become a more integral part of their daily lives. I think for me, what's more interesting is how businesses are embracing technology and becoming more robust online businesses. And this whole new trend of going direct to consumers, for a business to have an idea that they're working backwards from the customer, and they are targeting a very specific need, which might be small if you thought about traditional distribution, but when you are powered with technology as a lever, your access costs go down tremendously. So, to your point, how customer behaviors are evolving, there are some interesting brands. Like there's this brand called Slurp, started by two moms. They wanted to get good, healthy snacks for their kids. And now they've created a brand. That brand is now going global. They're growing to become
An Indian
actually
brand,
businesses.
correct?
Yeah, Indian brands. And then there is a brand called To Be Honest, which is kind of this 100% veggie snacks brand. There's a toy brand started by a couple that they wanted to make toys for their kids and grandchildren. And all of these are examples where a very specific need that is targeting, whether it's the desire to be healthy, desire to be organic, desire to be Indian, desire to be aspirational, they are becoming brands. And these brands are being conceived not just as brands within India, but to become global brands. And online is becoming a big enabler of that.
I wanted to ask you, how has work from home impacted your workforce and the consumers? You're actually increasing your headcount around the world, at the same time telling people that you can work from home, no need to come to office, probably till 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
No, we are much more hopeful how things might improve in the world. It's till June of 2021, but 95% of our workforce is working from home. And I would say, we are very grateful and fortunate to be in an industry where we can be effective to a large extent in the corporate side. But we have a very large operations team. The people are on the ground in our warehouses, logistics, on the delivering products to customers. And to your question, how things have changed, obviously our number one priority is the safety and the well-being of all of these employees, including the ones that are working from home, because different kind of behaviors seep in as people are working from home. They kind of become isolated. They're trying to figure out how do they interact with their peers and colleagues and so on. Now we had to make significant process changes on the ground to make people safe. But I think for me, if I just step back, this whole period, I'm personally a very optimistic person in general, and I feel that what this has done is it has highlighted how people have become just more innovative. So if you look at the number of ideas that have come across during this phase within our company, I can look at many things, whether there is a team that built an Alexa skill that allowed onboarding of employees from home. So because it's a voice assistant, you can actually engage with your employees from your mobile phone. So that's a very interesting, to a machine learning model that allows our associates to realize if they are within 6 feet of somebody else so that they can keep safe. So just a whole suite of ideas that have evolved. And more importantly, I think this period would test the culture, the leadership principles, and the mechanisms of companies and leaders so that they can lead beyond their line of sight. And I feel that if you have those robust mechanisms, you would actually come out of this far stronger, more kinder, more inclusive, because you've kind of learned to be more respectful of people's perspectives in the way that we interact with each other, and more resilient as a workforce. So I think when we return to normal, I'm very hopeful that we're going to bring in the in-person collaboration, inventiveness, the goodness of that, and layer on it the flexibility of work from home and the inclusivity that we have learned from our experience over the last 1 year. And I think it would probably create more effective teams.
Correct. Bhavesh, the energy landscape clearly is changing very, very rapidly. And, and the pandemic has probably made the climate change narrative far more mainstream. You're building the world's largest two-wheeler EV plant. What prompted you to pivot?
Ajit, it's a very important phase in the journey of sustainability today. And I believe COVID has accelerated this change. And this change is not, first and foremost, this change is not led by businesses today. All stakeholders, be it the average citizen, be it investors, be it governments, and be it businesses, everybody is much more socially conscious. And I think COVID has just enhanced the awareness of the risks as a society that we carry because of climate change and because of other health issues, right? So all across the board, there's a lot more social awareness. In fact, we've seen because of COVID, after COVID, many countries, including India, including many countries in Europe, have increased their pledge for others, governmental support for transition to sustainable mobility and sustainable energy. And we're in a unique time where there's this enhanced social awareness in all stakeholders, and the technology for delivering sustainability at scale is also maturing. And it's not yet fully mature. The cost curves, the supply chains are not yet there, but we are getting there. Right. So these two mega themes, I believe, will completely transform the mobility industry and obviously the energy industry. And when I look at our business, if you look at the electric vehicle journey of the last decade across the world, most of the focus has been on large format Western style products, be it the pickup trucks in America or luxury sedans, or in China also large SUVs, because most of the EV disruptors have either been an American company or a Chinese company. Now, when you look at the mass of the world, majority of the vehicles around the world, majority of the energy consumed by vehicles is in what I would call urban mobility vehicles, be it two-wheelers, three-wheelers, hatchbacks, urban sedans, etc. Cars that brands like Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Renault, etc. would make. Now, nobody is really looking to electrify that segment, and this, by the way, is a majority of all vehicles sold in the world and a majority of energy consumed by all vehicles in the world. So our ambition has been to build a global scale business, global quality business for electric mobility out of India. We aim to manufacture in India, leverage the Indian R&D capabilities, invest heavily in R&D here in India. And the first step in that direction is the two-wheeler business, because India is the world's largest two-wheeler market.
Mr. Jindal, you are a power producer yourself, as well as a large user of energy in your steel plants. Coal in India remains the key source in our energy basket, even though renewables have made a massive strides. But once gasified into hydrogen, that coal itself can also become clean. So how are companies such as yourself are adapting to these new changing landscapes?
So we are into two separate businesses which are both consuming coal. One is power generation, and one is making steel in blast furnaces using met coal. So here again, I see a great opportunity for India to be a global leader, is to move from coal-based power generation to a power producer which can use renewable power. I mean, we have, as India, we have moved along quite well in taking sort of a leadership position in renewable. But I think we ought to do much more and much faster. So if the government takes a view on this, that we need to make India coal-free by 2025, maybe 2030 at the most, where Coal India must shut down. and all the coal mining must shut down. I'm making a very big statement, but this is something which we as a country we need to do. And I was mentioning before we started that I went to Dhanushkodi because I see a huge potential of wind power generation in that part of India. And it's unbelievable that we have so much energy being wasted. We have so much solar, we have so much sun, so much wind. Coming to the steel business, these are early days when we are talking about hydrogen to be the fuel for burning for reducing iron ore into steel, into iron. Globally, a lot of companies are doing the R&D, and we are also working at JSW Steel. We are also working overtime to see how we can convert our existing steel plants and reduce our carbon footprint, how we can reduce the carbon input through the coal route into the blast furnaces.
Mr. Subramaniam, one thing is what every boardroom's discussing, I guess, along with energy security, is of course de-risking supply chain. Everyone's looking at a China plus one strategy. Which segments, if India Inc. can play a significant role in this shifting supply chain of global companies and corporations?
I think this is a deep-rooted question which hinges on many factors, including development of infrastructure within the country. During this pandemic, beyond the pandemic, when China made incursions into a border, I think we all got together as a nation, and as people put together a process by which where certain excess dependence were there on China supplied items. We, in a desperate manner, even as Larsen & Toubro, tried to shift it all back to other supply sources, including trying to do many things on our own within the country.
Right.
It is also a fact that when the COVID hit, there were many supply chain situations from Western Europe and even the United States, which got very badly hit. Those countries went into total lockdown. And luckily for me, the Amit and Bhavishas have still not found the e-com solution to put up a steel plant or a power plant. So we are still in business. And all the businesses that we have need supply chain from across the world, not only from India, because some of the products are yet to be made in India that efficiently or is still not there from a technology point of view. This accelerated the requirement to do things within the country. It's not only us, but I find a slew of MSMEs, SMEs, and even other organizations have taken upon themselves to find out indigenous solutions, to put together mechanisms to manufacture or produce solutions within the country.
And that's where I guess the PLI schemes also will play a big role.
Yes, the PLI scheme will play a big role. The easing of monetary situation will play a big role. The ability that we can do it ourselves, that feeling that has come in many of us, that why depend on others, we can do something on our own, is a feel-good factor that has come in. The general attitude of the world towards China, the need to take manufacturing out of China into other countries, including in India, is going to play a very big role in that. The fact that the world still needs cost-effective solutions, and China is not the only country which can provide cost-effective economical solutions, but there are other parts of the world it can produce, which includes primarily India, is a big factor in our favor. That we have a fairly vibrant democracy with good court system and a system which is reasonably stable, it makes a big difference to how the world looks at making things in India. I think all these things come together, but essentially, when you need to have a very efficient supply chain system functioning beyond technology and products, I think you need a very effective infrastructure. When I say very effective infrastructure, the port should function efficiently, the road system should function efficiently, the way to transport goods and services should function efficiently. It's come a long way. It's come a very long way, especially today when you go down the road system, enormous development has taken place. The ports predominantly have got privatized. The airport cargo and airports themselves have got privatized. So there is, I'm not trying to say government is not efficient, but the general feeling is when it is done privately through private sector organization, things are generally more efficient and less bureaucratic. I think there's one tax, one nation, and such things that the government has brought on is making the supply chain and efficiency come and enforce into the system in many ways beyond what many people have thought about. So I think there is a way forward, and this should result in good stead for us.
Ajit, may I come in on
Yes,
this
of course, please.
point? Because I know that India Inc. is going to be watching this program, and so I believe very strongly that India has a huge capacity to ancillarize, to produce the products which China has been supplying to the Indian industry. Especially if you look at the auto industry or for the white goods industry, everything China kind of captured out of Indian manufacturing. A company which was, for example, which was making compressors in India, they have become what do you call, assemblers. They import all the components because China started throwing at such cheap rates that everybody became assemblers. So I think it is very important, as SNS rightly said, that after the insurgents on the borders, we also at JSW decided that we will not bring anything from China. And the good part and the good fallout of that is that now a lot of industries have our ancillaries have come up who are now supplying to us.
Can I also just make a thank you? I think the points mentioned by Mr. Jindal and Mr. SNS are all very relevant. I would like to add that in addition to bringing supply chains here, one more area where India Inc. should really focus on is in technologies of the future and making India a leader in the supply chains of the future. For example, in the auto components industry, bringing the cell manufacturing here in India, and not just doing partnerships with other global companies, but doing the R&D here in India.
Sure, Biva, everyone's talking about, we are running really out of time, but 2 quick points. Firstly, to Biva, everyone's talking about physical infrastructure. There's another very critical issue now, post-pandemic, of course, which is cybersecurity and cyber infrastructure. Have we woken up to this, clear and present danger?
I think we are. At least I can speak for the larger financial services sector, including banks and insurers and mutual funds and so on, pension companies. Very, very bright and center of how we look at risk. And we are handling customer data. So very, very critical, apart from data being siphoned out, but even sharing customer data is a complete no-no, it being available in the dark web and so on. So, so can we do more? Yes, we can, and more so because of this entire work from home. A lot of it was physically protected, which now is really work from anywhere in the planet, and we are handling data. But at the same time, I don't think because of that threat, we should have additional somewhat retrograde, curbs as we start getting back to work.
Amit, last word to you. Both, Amazon as well as Bhavish's Ola, they represent the young millennial world. But as a country, are we leveraging enough the fact that we are the largest cohort of the young population that is below 35, both in terms of technology as well as innovation and human capital management?
Well, I mean, you have great ideas that have been just shared in this segment out here by my colleagues. I would say that sometimes it is easy to miss the really small but meaningful innovations that are happening on an everyday basis in the broader ecosystem. And I do have the good fortune to kind of see the small businesses be resourceful and inventive. And I talked about this direct-to-consumer trend as an example, where people are creating very creative brands to serve consumers. And the fact that during COVID, 150,000, 1.5 lakh such businesses came online. More than 50,000 of them actually came online using a non-English language. More than 70,000 of them have become exporters, creating global brands, and that exports through these brands have exceeded $2 billion. I feel that on a daily basis, there's a lot of innovation happening. And technology and online, in my opinion, is a very strong non-linear lever that is going to drive social and economic change in this country. I mean, we talked about a lot of things, and all of this kind of feeds into this whole notion of an Atmanirbhar Bharat. Atmanirbhar Bharat has to start with an Atmanirbhar Indian. And that implies that we need the ability to unleash the potential of every citizen in this country. And I genuinely believe, in addition to all that we talked about, technology is going to be a big lever, big kind of a level playing field from that perspective. So I'm very excited to see the innovation that I'm privy to through what I see on Amazon. And I'm sure Bhavesh and many others see the same on a daily basis. And it's just the beginning. So I think this young force over the next decade, this promises to be India's century in all the way I can think of.
Thank you, everyone, for that engaging conversation. But sadly, I have to end here because we've completely run out of time. Thank you once again for taking time out and sharing your thoughts and perspectives on this changing paradigm.
A big thank you to our panelists and of course to Arijit. A big thank you also to all of you tweeting. Remember, the hashtag is #ET Awards.